Hey BookTube, this is still Roz and this is still my channel, A Journey Through Books, and I'm not going to start this video with a regular disclaimer of it's been a while. I know it's been 2 weeks, but I'm pretty sure you all understand, we're all adults here, that life just gets in the way and sometimes you just don't have the time. Just like this morning, I finished working on school stuff at about 2 a.m. and the reason I did that, even though it was my Saturday/Sunday morning, was so that I can maybe get some sleep this night, well, this week. But we'll see what happens because it just doesn't end, the workload. It just never ends. But anyway, I'm dressed for working on my computer. I'm wearing my big wearable blanket that I made. It even comes with a hood so I can sit and do schoolwork and look like a Jedi. Or at least be warm and comfy. It is comfy. Anyway, I'm now waffling on. So let's get on with the books that I've read in the last 2 weeks. I have read 5 books in the last 2 weeks. The last week was just this super skinny, but actually let's just do this one first because if not, why not? So this is the latest book that I finished. This is the set work that I didn't choose for the grade 8 first additional language, which is South African for second language, English kids. So this is their first year of high school, etc. Super skinny, a whole grand total of 84 pages, and in that 84 pages there are still questions and stuff. So, you know, like pages of questions and things like that going on. I can't say that I'm super impressed. I suppose there's worse books out there, but you know, I would rather have done something different, like an Alex Rider short story, because yeah, it would have been a bit more interesting. What this has got going for it is the fact that it's set in South Africa. Basically, you're following a boy who's grown up in the township. His name is Ben, and he lives with his Uncle Innocent. And there's irony if you want it, because he's far from it, because his mother was killed in a fire at the mission, and he manages to save a man and his daughter from drowning. And it turns out that this is Professor Philander, and they are escaping. Professor Philander is a scientist, and he has created a centrifuge that can make diamonds, uncut diamonds, massive things, the size of your fist, if not bigger. And obviously people are out for that. And in the 2 months that they are here working on building their escape plan, which is, just for the record, some scientific version of a hot air balloon, they teach him how to read, and they manage to solve and destroy a drug ring, and what else did they make? Oh, build this balloon and arrange for Ben to go back to the mission where he came from in 84 pages with lengthy introductions and all sorts of things. So it didn't really quite make it on the realism, but I suppose for our ADHD nation, it is speedy enough to keep them occupied. And it's fast enough for it maybe to not be that painful to have to teach. Moving on. So the first book I'm going to talk about is probably the least favorite of the week before's reads. And this is The Loney by, what was it? Andrew Michael Hurley. Now, basically your synopsis of this is that you have a hyper-religious family where they have 2 sons. The one son is the narrator, and he is narrating from the future, and the other son is a boy by the name of Hanny, who he's got mental cognitive issues. In other words, he is not quite there, and he is unable to speak. So they go on this pilgrimage, by the sounds of it, every year to try and heal, let's go for heal, not fix, the one son, where they do religious rituals, etc. These rituals have a very ominous feel about them. It doesn't feel like something that a loving family would do. The mother particularly is excessively narrow-minded in her views that it's got to be this way or the highway. On top of this, you've now got a new priest that has come to join them because their old priest died. Suspicious circumstances, but anyway. And in this setting, which is actually very well described, there are a lot of ominous things, happenings, activities, and people around. From a girl in a wheelchair who apparently is pregnant, willingly or not, to a human, we don't know. It's all these weird, crazy things that are going on that are completely anti the idea of Christianity and all things that are good and holy. So why they keep coming to this place, heaven only knows. Andrew Hurley has a video, I'll see if I can remember, if I can find the video again, online, where he discusses this book and he shows the setting where he's placed this novel. And I must admit, it does look like a very gothic, haunted place where civilization, humanity, and goodness forgot. So that side of it was very effective. But I don't know if I was disappointed because I had high expectations. I'd heard some really good things about this. Or whether I was disappointed because although the synopsis sounds fabulous, it really felt like not much happened. I also think that the choice of having the narrator, you never find out what the one son's name is. They just call him Smith, which is his surname. Because he's narrating this from the future, you kind of know that he's going to be alright, and you have ideas already of what's going to happen. So yeah, I wasn't a huge fan. The other thing is that it just had the atmosphere of gloomy, desolate, desperate, whereas generally your gothic novels have, in some form or another, a bit of a romantic aspect to it, where there was nothing like that in this. It was just ew all the way through. Moving on. So this was one of the last books that I read for March Mystery Madness, and this is The Word is Murder by Anthony Horowitz. And a brief synopsis on this. So you have the character Anthony Horowitz, who is a writer, who is approached by a consultant to the police by the name of Hawthorne. He was a cop, a detective, and this guy Hawthorne asks Horowitz to write about him. Initially Horowitz turns him down, and then obviously he goes ahead and does it. And that is then, this book is following the murder of a woman in England. Her murder is quite interesting. You find out on the first page that she heads off to a funeral parlor that morning to arrange her funeral, only to die that day. So it's, did she know, was she in danger, what was it? So that side is quite interesting. The other thing that made this interesting is that obviously Anthony Horowitz is the writer of the story, and he is a character within the book. And I know that this is not something that is generally popular. I can't say that I'm usually a fan of that idea myself, but because I know so much about Anthony Horowitz, I've been following him since I was in high school, actually. I didn't even know that. But I've discovered since I started putting together statistics and things a couple of, well, over 10, 20 years ago, that he was one of the writers that I really enjoyed back then even. And since then I've followed his Alex Rider series, the good and the bad of his adult fiction, most of his TV work, etc. And because of this, I was quite comfy figuring out what was real and what wasn't for most parts of it. For example, I know the fact that he was involved in the Tintin movies, and that also, though, I think it was the point. It kind of takes you out of the idea of fiction, because I'm now sitting wondering what the logistics are of, you know, Peter Jackson and Steven Spielberg and putting words in their mouth facing this fictional character in this novel. And so there were things like that. But overall, I found it quite interesting because it wasn't your typical crime novel where you were just solving the crime. Now you are solving a crime through the eyes of a writer. And one of the things that I really enjoyed was, I think it's the second chapter in this, where you have Hawthorne going through Horowitz's first draft of the first chapter, and he's picking everything to pieces because you don't know if the bell rang, because what happens if this person was here, or what happens if that was there, or something along those lines. And so it was very interesting seeing things through the eyes of a writer, particularly with the fact that Hawthorne is not a very likable character. I mean, you've obviously got a Holmes-Watson relationship going on here. You've got the super cop who is better, more brilliant than 99% of the police force multiplied by 12. So you've got this magnificent cop, and he knows it. So that makes him a bit obnoxious to start off with. And then on top of it, he doesn't have the greatest personality traits. So unlike Holmes, where you were just fascinated with his brain and how things were working, here you've got Hawthorne, who is just a secretive and doesn't like telling you how he comes to light with his conclusions. But on top of it, he's not exactly that nice. And Horowitz sits as a character in the book dealing with how he's going to try and put the story across with an unlikable hero, because, as he said, they're called detective stories. They're not called murder stories. Well, I suppose they are called murder stories too, but you know, they're not victim stories. They're detective stories. You want to follow the detective. You want to like your detective, etc. And, you know, having one that is just smart is not necessarily enough, especially in today's day and age. So I really enjoyed that side of it as well. Overall, though, the writing was straightforward. The plot was interesting. It kept me going. There were twists and turns along the way, and as I said, I quite enjoyed the fact that Horowitz was then dealing with how to make a book that people want to read with a character you don't like. And one of the ways that he did that was to try and investigate Hawthorne while Hawthorne is investigating the crime. So I enjoyed it. I probably will read the next one because I'm curious to see how he takes this. The next book I'm going to talk about was another bit of a disappointment. This one is called Saving Sophie. It is by Ronald H. Balson. And this story is set in both the United States and in Palestine. Brief synopsis. $88.8 million go missing in the sale of a company. One of the lawyers, people involved in the sale of this, has gone missing. The two other people who were also directly involved with the exchange over of money have been found dead. The guy who's gone missing, his daughter has been kidnapped. She's only 7, if memory serves me right. It's either 7 or 9, but I think she was 7. And so that is a pretty interesting synopsis. The two main characters in the story, however, are the lawyer and the private investigator that the legal firm hire to solve the problem, because they are now sitting with a loss of 88 million that they are accountable for because it didn't reach the people that they were supposed to. So that side is very interesting. I'm going to put this down. My fingers are going a bit numb and I need to practice for the next book that's coming. So the synopsis of the story should have made it a gripping read. I'm well aware that in the hands of somebody like Ludlam or any of your other thriller writers out there, this would be a book that I would not have wanted to put down at all. And considering I was on holiday, I could read until 4 a.m. in the morning if I needed to. So, you know, the fact that I was plodding through a couple of pages a night is not the best advert going. It is interesting, however, in the sense that it does give you a historical background of what happened in Israel, Palestine, etc. with regards to the settlement of people, etc. in those days. It also covers, let's say, some cultural differences, because the guy that went missing, he was an American Jew and his wife is a Muslim from Palestine, and her father did not allow the wedding while their relationship, and she ran away to marry him, and it is the grandfather who has the granddaughter who's kidnapped her. So there are a lot of things that are very interesting in the story, but I found that there was a lot of nothing, and I felt that was a bit disappointing. The end of it was exciting, I'll give you that much. The end was super exciting. Thoroughly loved the end of it. Well, enjoyed the end of it. And then we get on to my mammoth for March, because I did a mammoth. And this mammoth took my mom and I 3 days reading it out loud. And this is Tombland by C.J. Sansom. And this is the 7th book in the Matthew Shardlake series. And because of that, I don't want to say too much about it because, you know, spoilers and stuff. But I will say that in this book, Lady Elizabeth, who is only third in line to the throne at this point, so she's not very relevant, asks Matthew to do something for her. He's been working for her as a property lawyer since the previous book, and that side of the story is interesting as far as the mystery and the solving of the puzzle went. But I kind of feel that this book was a lot longer than it needed to be. Sansom goes through the Ket's rebellion in this, and if everybody's going, what the hell was that? I don't think you're alone, because even Sansom says that there's very little research or material regarding it available. And basically what it was is that your peasants had a bit of an uprising, because Somerset had said that he was the protector for the people, etc., and all these things that he was supposed to do to try and make things fair for them with regards to farming and actually making a life for themselves, because the poverty in the story is very obvious, and he doesn't follow through with what he says. So there's this massive rebellion, and I would say that about 70% of this book is revolving around the rebellion and has very little to do actually with the investigation that Shardlake is on. Although he obviously needs to be a part of it to find some of the information, but let's be honest, that was a lot of rebellion for a little piece of info. But once again, I also need to say though that because he's written these characters so well, I really love Sansom. I really love Sansom. I really love Shardlake. I really love Barrack. And the new guy in this one is, well, actually the previous one in Lamentation, Nick arrived. He seems pretty cool too, although he had his moments in this. And between the three of them, it's such a lovely cast of characters. And then, as I've said in the past, he really brings England to life back in those days. And it makes it such an interesting read that even though a little part of your brain says, but weren't we working on a murder mystery? What are we doing here? You don't really mind that much until you start realizing just how damned heavy this book is, and that you're probably doing weight training without intending to, because it's just not ending anyway soon. But I would still recommend reading this if you're a fan of the series. In fact, I'd recommend reading the series even if you aren't a fan of the series, because that just means you haven't read it yet. I can't think of why anybody wouldn't like Matthew Shardlake, but anyway. So there is that one. So I did my mammoth as well. And boy, was it a mammoth. Oh, the other thing that's also interesting with this, while I'm talking about it, is the last 70 pages of this book is a historical essay on the rebellion and the facts, and where he's had to elaborate and work out things because there is no description or there is no written material on things, etc. So that part was also quite interesting, actually. Yeah, it's one thing about reading Sansom is that you get to enjoy a story and then learn something at the same time. Well, those are the books that I have read. I almost put off making this video because I am that far from the end of Silas Marner. I have got, what, less than 50 pages to go. This one's nice and thin, but I was kind of thinking I should just finish this first and then make the video, and then I thought, you know what, the last time I said that, it took a couple of months before I made a video, so I'm not going to do that again. And other than that, I'm reading books for school, so I'm reading The Mark by Edith Bulbring, which is a dystopian novel set. Who knows where, but she's a South African and there are Hardy-Dars, so it has to be South Africa, because I don't think anybody has Hardy-Dars anywhere else. And then a picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, and you know, this is also one of those books where it's really plumped up with questions and extra information. And then on top of it, I put together a 90-page study guide for the kids this weekend, which is why I went to bed so late. And then I'm doing other things like poetry and whatnot, as much research as possible so that I can get those guys as prepared as possible for their exams. So if you don't see me next week, it's because I'm busy. If you do, count your lucky stars. But I'm going to try and still get a video out once a week. Try is the right word. But then if I don't get to read anything, it's not going to be much of a video. It'll be me sitting here going, well, we covered another 50 pages of Dorian Gray and we did about 7 chapters worth of questions. It's not going to be very thrilling for you. The only people who will care are the parents of the kids I teach. And I'm not making these videos for them. In fact, I never want them to know about these videos. So I'm going to sign it off there and head back. Actually, I'm not going to go back to work now. I'm going to call it a night. I think it's around 9 o'clock already. And I'm going to climb into bed with a book that I'm going to have to teach. Because schoolwork and... But anyway, this one I must admit is proving kind of interesting at the moment. I didn't expect that. Anyway, that's me. Stop waffling. Bye for now. Happy reading.